Hi everyone. I think there's quite a few people still joining. There's Ben Wilshire here from Driven. Jeffrey's with us here as well. So we'll probably just give it a couple of minutes before to allow some more people to join. I'm conscious we're only 1 minute over. And yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar with using Zoom, which I think most of us know the way the world is, there is a chat function within the Zoom features that allow people to post questions, and there is time for a Q&A. So we're going to project an overview, and there's a Q&A session that we've got at the end. And yeah, so if you can kindly post questions in the chat area or even raise a hand using the reactions tool during the chat, that would be fantastic. So yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining, and we hope you find it interesting. We'll hand over to Jeffrey, who I think's ready to go.
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of technical difficulties there to open up, but good morning, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining. I know that originally we were going to do this just with members of the Bexley Motor Club, but we have opened it up to some prospective members, some other members of the industry, educators that all have a vested interest in what we're doing here at Oro Station. And, as this pandemic drags on, things, there hasn't been much to look forward to these days. And we thought that it would be fun to get everyone onto a call and to understand a little bit more of the design process that Ben and his team have gone through in creating the future home of Oro Station and the Bexley Motor Club up here in Oro-Medonte. You can actually see behind me one of the first iterations of the track map hanging here on our office wall. And I'm actually up here on site at our office with my partner, Dan Gallo, where we've been pleasantly watching the trucks rolling in right now that are bringing in our engineered fill material, preparing for our construction season. And so, I mean, just to give you a quick overview of the project in general. So Oro Station, it really started from a passion of motorsports, because from a very young age, I've been, in love with cars, and it's been a very big piece of my life. And we had been sort of watching what was happening in this form of the automotive world with high-speed performance cars that were, no longer safe to be on the road, or you couldn't really use them on the road. And so now these motorsport clubs started to pop up around the world that were providing a venue, a safe venue to use performance vehicles at their full potential. But at the same time, there was another trend in which you had automotive groups going into experiential marketing to be able to showcase new technologies, as well as the development of new technology, whether that be autonomous or alternative fuels. And so by creating a property that catered to both, what we are doing is creating a home for the automotive community. And that community is in the enthusiasts, it is the companies that are interacting in the space, for educators. And so we're basically creating a center of excellence, all focused around the art and joy of the automobile. And I've sort of used the comparison to some people that it is designed a little bit like Ski-Doo Sports, in which we have Bexley Motor Club, which is open to enthusiast individuals that they can store their cars on site. They have a community there in which they are out enjoying their passions of racing on circuit. But then in Oro Station's main complex, we have a commercial business park where we have over 500,000 square feet of space that are dedicated for race teams, for automotive restorers, for research labs. And we will, over the coming months, have some pretty exciting announcements over some of the tenancies that we've been working with in there that are looking to locate permanently to Oro Station. And so it's been, a humbling experience to be able to get this project to where it is today. It's been, I think it started as a bit of a long shot. A lot of people questioned, how we would be able to get there, but Dan and I just worked very diligently to get ourselves through all the approvals and zoning. And so in 2019, we achieved the full zoning for this project. We have now got our plan of subdivision is fully approved, and we are out there with earthworks now. And Ben is here today to talk about the design of the circuit itself and the process of what it takes to design and build a racing circuit. And so with that, I mean, again, I thank everyone for coming and for their enthusiasm and wanting to learn more about it. And I'm very much looking forward to the other side of the pandemic and hosting you up here at the property to be able to see the vision with your own eyes. But with that, I will turn it over to Ben to talk us through how this has come to be and what the process is of building a circuit.
Thanks, Jeffrey. So yeah, looks like spotlight's on me for a little while. So yeah, hopefully in a moment you'll be able to see a map of the track. Some of you may already be familiar with this, or maybe seeing it for the first time. So just to touch, before we delve into the detail on the layout, just wanted to touch really on, you know, how we start designing a track and, you know, how we went about this. As Jeffrey said, he's developed this vision for Oro Station and the Automotive Innovation Park and the Motor Club for enthusiasts. And really, you know, we were handed essentially a blank sheet of paper to say, you know, this is our vision and this is our brief. Here's the property that you've got to work with. You know, what can your team come up with? And this was around, it must be 2 or 3 years ago now. So it's quite, you know, quite a process that we've worked through with Jeffrey and his team to develop what you're seeing already on the screen, which might look, you know, just like a colored drawing at the moment, but there's a lot of engineering, a lot of thought, and a lot of science and data and design that's gone on behind what you're seeing here. So the first thing is just to give you a bit of familiarity to the site. So to the south of the page and just off of the page is the entrance, or you can just about actually make out a small roundabout at the very south of the page, which would be one of the entrances into the property off of line 7. And we're literally opposite Lake Simcoe Airport, for those of you that are familiar with it. So fantastic opportunity to develop a facility like this opposite an airport, one from a logistical perspective, but also the obvious benefits being with noise as well. So yeah, great site, 212 acres in total. And what we've got here to the south of the property is what we're calling the Automotive Innovation Park. And as Jeffrey alluded to earlier, there will be buildings here for tenants, whether that be race teams, research labs, whether it's car, you know, more sales focused automotive companies. For those of you that may have been to the UK or have seen online, there's a development over in England called Vista Heritage. And that has driven some of the inspiration behind this project for Jeffrey in terms of the look and the feel from a heritage perspective. So a lot of these buildings will be architecturally designed to be more in keeping with some of the rural architectural design you see in Canada. So some more sort of courtyard and stable like buildings, rather than having big open expanses of asphalt and very dull functional buildings. These will be more architecturally pleasing than most circuits. There's a building there within that automotive innovation area labeled G, if you can just make it out, which is where you would arrive if you're coming for a track day, a corporate driving day, or any type of event that's you know, that's got any relationship to the track. And that's really what we're calling the pavilion, and that's where the heart of the track operations will happen. There's also a building labeled H, which you can just make out next to the pavilion, and that sits opposite a large dynamics area. So as well as the track, we do have the opportunity for car manufacturers, for corporate events to host different types of driving activities, whether that be driving school, whether it be skid pad training, whether it's even motorcycle learner lessons. So these types of things can happen on that large dynamics area. What's not shown on this plan is there are ideas there for things like low friction surfaces and even perhaps a kick plate in the future. So it's quite a flexible space that we've got there that we can adapt for doing more driving activities. You'll notice the site is sort of naturally divided into two, with a cluster of buildings towards the south and then a further cluster towards the north of the site. So I'll just shift gears and move to the north before we talk about the circuit itself. You'll see a label there called Bexley Motor Club, which nestles its way in between turn 4 and turn 13. And those buildings there are the heart of the membership club. They're there for some of you as members or prospect members to be able to store your to store your artwork with your cars and enjoy the social environment that is the Bexley Motor Club. And we've purposely created some separation from the innovation part to create a more intimate, exclusive area for members. And then wrapping around the circuit further to the north, you'll see some smaller buildings between turn 3 and turn 4, which are the car barns. So larger properties for people to have their own private area where they can have some more sort of family space and still have ability to store their cars as well, with exclusive views directly overlooking the track and a service road directly around the members pit area. The members club itself is labelled F, so just between turn 5 and turn 6. It has its own private pit lane to access the track. And I'll start moving on to the circuit now, because the separation actually is reflected in the circuit as well. The full track length that we've designed at Oro Station is just shy of 4 kilometres, and that's measured on the centre line of the circuit. But we have the ability to split the circuit into 2 and run different permutations. You may be able to make out in lighter grey colours some link sections. So if you look very carefully along the 2 back parallel straights where it's labelled E, there are some light grey sections that allow the circuit to run in split configuration mode. That means for members, if for whatever reason there's a corporate event or a driving school event running on the South Circuit, it means that members still have somewhere to come and play and enjoy their cars with a different circuit configuration. I believe there's about 7 or 8 different configurations that you can make from this, with the different links operating in different ways. So I'll move on to the circuit. Hopefully that just gives you sort of context of you know, how the site is laid out and some of the logic. This will be a long-term, you know, phase development over time. So it's not going to be on day one that all of these buildings will appear, but certainly the pavilion and the track is the key goal for everyone to enjoy the facility. So how do we design a track, and you know, how do we go about it? You've got a blank sheet of paper. Quite usually the logic is that they tend to design themselves in many ways, or at least the start line defines itself. So if I just rewind back to what I was saying at the beginning of the presentation, the innovation park is logically located, you know, next to the site entrance. It's a flatter piece of ground. It's right by the site, by the entrance to the property, and generally the site is relatively flat. So the circuit itself only has, I say only, it's still significant when you're in the car, around 6 meters of gradient change, and generally runs from a high point at turn 3 all the way down to the innovation park at its lowest point. So the start finish straight from turn 15 to turn 1 is actually sat on a natural contour line. So it's a flat area of the property. And that just really jumped out to me right at the beginning. And this started literally with Jeffrey and I driving around a field with a large scale piece of paper with the contours mapped on. And we just went round and noted down any small crests, compressions and flat areas that we could use. And you could see right away that there was a natural space for that innovation park and the start finish straight in the paddock area. So that really was why the track kind of ended up where it is, with that start finish straight in pavilion. And from there, what we're looking to do is, you know, maximize the length and enjoyment of the circuit, strike a balance of speed and enjoyment. So you can see, I'll just do a sort of commentary lap as we're presenting. I think it's going to be more exciting when we have Karun Chandok, who's on the line, to demonstrate a lap in his simulator in a moment. But just to give you your bearings so you can enjoy that more when you're watching. Turn 1 is a fast right-hander, probably down 1 gear, and a very short apex, with then a run into turn 2. So it allows people to potentially overtake into the second corner if they stay to the left-hand side of the track between turn 1 and turn 2. Turn 2 has some banking on it as well. So even if you a little bit hot into the corner, you can still use some of the banking to help you around the turn. And you've got really a key corner here to maximize the exit speed, because then afterwards you've got a large long straight around 700 or 800 meters, and apologies for using metric. I think actually in Canada you guys are okay with that. It's usually in the US we're on feet, but yeah, 700 or 800 meter acceleration then up to turn 3, and we climb there 6 meters. So that back straight is not flat; it's actually undulates as you go up and down. Someone's asking there how much runoff at turn 3. We've got paved runoff there and 6-pack tires. So one of the things, I'll just take that question now as it's relevant to what we're talking about. We've just submitted to the FIA last week this layout, and they've assessed all of the runoff areas. We're confident, and we've run simulations the same as the FIA do on all of the runoff areas. So where you've got the paved runoff areas, they're sort of the areas where say higher risk or higher likely areas where people will have incidents, and that's why we've got the paved runoff areas. We have got some room there if we need it to push those barriers back at turn 3, which may end up being the reality when we get to construction phase. But we've certainly got enough runoff to accommodate an FIA grade 3 license, which I'll come on to in a moment what that means. So as you approach turn 3, you actually reach a crest, and you go over a crest down the hill, and between 3 and 4 there's a set of S's that really just full acceleration. We don't like having, we don't want to have too many just dead straights, so we tried to keep a more organic feel to the circuit. So as you approach turn 4, the circuit starts to wind slightly left. So this is not straight line braking into turn 4, which makes it super tricky. For those of you that are track drivers or race drivers, you'll appreciate that there'll be some trail braking on the way into turn 4 with a late apex. So that introduces again an area where potentially creates some mistakes. It creates multiple lines for drivers, and I'm sure it also creates some overtaking in a racing situation. The next sequence of corners are my personal favorite part of the track, between turn 4 and turn 9. And it's a set of S's which undulates up and down. So if you imagine turn 5 being a high point, turn 6 being a low point, turn 7 being a high point, and we're dropping up and down 2 or 3 meters at a time through those S's until you reach turn 9, which is a really tricky right-hander that requires some early braking, accuracy on the apex, and requires enough, a good smooth exit again, because you've then got a long straight on the exit. We're then running parallel again. We've been really efficient with the use of the design. We've got these 2 parallel straights that allows us to have these link sections to split the circuits. There's also quite a unique feature and signature of the Eurostation circuit. And then you're into a super fast right-hander, 4 for 5th gear right-hander, which is inspired a little bit by Stowe Corner at Silverstone, for those of you who might know it. Again, you're coming over a crest, so a slightly blind apex at turn 10, dropping downhill to turn 11, which is intentionally designed as a bit of an awkward corner, actually. It tightens on the exit, so you've got a super fast entry into turn 11, and then it tightens on the exit. So you have to be really careful not to overcook it on the entrance to turn 11. But there's plenty of space on the exit for making a mistake if you make one. And then turn 12, 13, and 14 all really blend into one last sequence. So we're coming over a crest at turn 12 and then diving slightly downhill into 13 with some banking. So if you imagine you're almost into a small bowl area at 13 and 14, and here it's just about patience and really just being smooth on the throttle and getting on the power and working your way back onto the start-finish straight. Turn 15 being absolutely flat out back onto the start-finish straight, again giving you around 800 meters of acceleration from turn 14 up to turn 1. For the eagle eyes on the call, you may have spotted at turn 15, there is a chicane option as well. So for track days or for motorcyclists or just for mixing up different permutations, there is a chicane option as well, which will obviously reduce speed onto the start finish straight and into turn one. So we think we've created, and hope you'll agree, we've created quite a special track here at Irish Station. It's got, you know, a mix of technical corners, high speed corners, undulation. I feel we've created a circuit where possible within the current safety guidelines is as much as we see as a sort of what I would call a traditional flowing circuit rather than some of the more modern F1 tracks. And just before we hand over to Kareem for driving, I'll just touch on, and someone asked earlier about the runoff at turn 3, and I'll just touch on the grades. So a grade 1 circuit you might hear, and that would be something that would be used for Formula 1. So this track here will be licensed by the FIA through GDS, who are the Canadian sporting body. We're going through that process at the moment, as I mentioned. And we're targeting a grade 3 track. So as I say, for FIA grade 1 is for Formula 1. Grade 2 and grade 3 allows you to host international motorsport events. Grade 2, you can essentially host anything except for Formula 1. Grade 3 is slightly more limited with racing in terms of power to weight, but it will accommodate things like FIA GT racing, world touring cars, for example, those types of machines. And I think the key thing to say here is that Jeffrey's vision is more around the day-to-day business of the automotive industry, members enjoying the circuit, the public coming to enjoy track days, rather than the racing aspects, which is often the way that some of these circuits go. So I think credit to Jeffrey for for having the vision for this and understanding, I think, where the market's headed. Someone's asking about banking on turn 2. Yeah, there is banking at turn 2 and also at turn 4 as well. So the late apex, there's actually around 5 or 6% banking there. So that's got the most banking at turn 4. So allow you to catapult into the S's, and again at 13 and 14. So the simulator does flatten that out a little bit, but we'll move on to Karun, and we're going to hopefully move over live to Karun at his home with his simulator. And we've also then, once we've seen Karun driving on the sim, we do have a pre-recorded lap as well, which will put you just above the cockpit of the car. We're using a Formula 3 car for this because we're modelling to get FIA grade 3, and that's how they assess the design. So a lot of our work's been done on a Formula 3, but we have driven it in multiple different cars. So yeah, without any the rambling from myself, I'll hand over to Karun. For those, hopefully you know Karun, but we work very closely with him, and I don't think he needs much introduction, but some credentials here on the screen for those of you that wish to read up a little more.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, guys, you know, for some of you who haven't interacted with Jeffrey and Ben before, my name's Karun Chandok. I've been working with Ben, as he mentioned, for the last few years. I've been lucky that my racing career has taken me through the single-seater ladder up to F1, and then across to Formula E, sports cars, and GT racing, and all sorts of other categories in between, including some historic stuff. So fortunately for me, it's taken me you know, on this journey where I started in Asia, but then now I've raced across, I guess, 5 different continents now, and to nearly 100 circuits. And that's how I got involved with working with Ben and the team at Driven, basically, is, you know, there were a couple of projects that came up where they needed a driver's perspective, and we started working together about 4 years ago. And it's been fun. It's been interesting because it allows me to go into this data bank of different tracks that I've driven on and enjoyed. And you try and, you know, incorporate several layers that we need to think about, of course. One is pure enjoyment and driving for track days and things like that. The second is things like overtaking opportunities and making sure that the track has got good raceability, which is a word I like to use for that. But also you've got to think of, you know, things like safety. You've got to think about, will the track cater for a variety of cars? I'm fortunate on the simulator I've got here set up at my sort of home office. I work with a company here in the UK where we get the track, and so we get the car models from various different categories. So, depending on what sort of track we're modeling, as Ben mentioned, in this case, it's a Formula 3 car for grade 3. But I've also used a GT car. I've also used a Porsche track day car, because ultimately for your day-to-day clientele, they're often not going to be in Formula 3 single-seaters. They're often going to be in GT cars. So we got to make sure the track is fun. And it's been, the pandemic has actually been really interesting for us in this respect, because Ben and I sat down in sort of April, May, when the whole country was starting to go into lockdown here in the UK. And we looked at it and went, okay, there's an opportunity here for either us to stop what we're doing and put a pause on working together for a while, or we go in the other way. And at that point, invested in getting, at the time, Ben had a simulator at their office, and they still do, but I invested in a separate one in my home office, which allowed us to carry on working remotely. And we've, in the end, actually ended up surprising the FIA, because often our simulations are more accurate compared to the real car data. And just to give you guys some context before I dive in, I'm fortunate to have contacts within Formula 2, Formula 3, and F1 teams. And that's allowed us to take the data we've created on the simulator from established tracks like Silverstone, Barcelona, Spa, and compare it to real data. So we know that the cars that we're using are accurate. And therefore, when we come to a track that we're designing completely on a clean sheet of paper, like here at Oro Station, we know that the car model works accurately, and therefore all the speeds that we're generating, the data we're generating to submit to the FIA for the runoffs and things like that are going to be spot on. So yeah, that just gives you a little bit of background as to how we work together. And in this circuit's particular case, I think, Ben, it's fair to say there were probably 4 different corners where, when we looked at it in 2D on the CAD drawing or on the drawings, the engineering drawings that we were studying, it looked great and we were happy with it and we were ready to submit it. But then when we made the sim model and we did a couple of working sessions, I came away thinking, it's not quite right. And this has now been the case, not just with this circuit, it's happened with most of our projects, but around the lap here, for example, I think turns 8 and 9, turns 13, 14, certainly the last section, even turn 3, the radius of turn 3, we made some mods. So there were some key little changes that just made the track a little bit better. So just to give you some examples of how and why the simulator has come into play for us. But yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll try and spin it around so you can have a look. Hopefully you guys will be able to see, but I'll try and talk you around a lap of the circuit. And then, as Ben mentioned, we're probably better off playing the lap back so you can have a proper look anyway. So let's fire this up. Get into position. I'll keep the microphone there so you can probably hear me as I go around.
Just while you're doing that as well, Karim, just to touch on what you were saying about data generation. Obviously, the overview I gave earlier of the track was a very high level, but the generation of data and runoff areas is something we spend a lot of time looking at, and it also influences the profile of the track as well. So we're limited by the speed data on how quickly we change elevation as well. There's a stack of drawings behind this that demonstrate that. So over to you, Karim.
So yeah, heading out of the pit lane, as Ben mentioned, we're going to come up to turn 2. It's got a little bit of banking even in the sim, and it's quite important to get a good exit from here down the back straight. It was interesting when we studied the speed profiles, the straight here up to turn 3 and the start finish straight actually end up being fairly similar in terms of straight line speed. This next section, quite interesting because you're always turning as you go past all these buildings on the right up to this hairpin, which is a long radius braking zone. You're braking and turning all the way in, get the nose tucked in nicely. And then this is a tricky sequence of corners. You're going to have to really think about your positioning, make sure the car's in the right part, just to make sure when you get to this last par here, you're in the right line to turn into the right-hander, turn 9. Down the back straight and into this fast right-hander. You can carry a lot of speed through here. It should be, in a Formula 3 car, about 170k when you get it all dialed up. Another quick right-hander here. And this last section is going to be massively challenging because you go through a fast right before braking and turning for the left-hander. And this left here, you're always struggling to accelerate back out. The rear of the car, always unstable. Faster start, finish straight. The first right-hander, down a gear, carry a lot of speed through there. 200k at the apex of the corner, the slowest point. So it is a very fast corner before stopping and turning again for this. So I'll just carry on a lap. Maybe I'll turn the volume up, and then we can run through the onboard after this. But yeah, it's been a really fun layout. I think we've put a lot of emphasis on trying to make sure there's some good character, the corners with a lot of character, I should say, in terms of just using the curves and the elevation, and also corner sequences that will make it interesting to drive. So one of the things that you're going to have to watch out for, certainly with this sort of track, I think, is just making sure that the line you get is spot on. It's not going to be an easy track, but I think all the great tracks aren't. If you look at Sebring or Le Mans, Suzuka, they're the difficult tracks that drivers and riders on bikes enjoy going to. So I think it's great to have tracks which are challenging, which are difficult. And, on the whole, you get a lot of satisfaction at the end of it. So that's a couple of laps of me just having a look at it now. But I think, Ben, it might be better resolution if you perhaps roll the lap we recorded earlier just to show everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll hand over. I think Jack here on our team's got control to be able to run a lap for you so you can see a bit clearer. We wanted you guys to be able to see Karun actually, talking through and driving on the sim, but mindful of some of the light reflection on the screen. So we'll just run you through a lap that we'd pre-recorded, again in a Formula 3 car.
And sorry, Ben, if I can just chime in. So one of the things when Karun was talking through some of these challenges in here, and just to put some people's mind at ease, is that a key thing while we were designing was looking at something that the faster you push the track, the more challenging it got, but that it was still something that, if you're not pushing the limits, that this track is something that is quite enjoyable and entertaining to drive. You don't have to be driving at the upper limit to enjoy it, but the faster you go, the more it will push back and challenge you.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeffrey. I think, we're very conscious of the fact that, and certainly I'm very conscious of the fact that, racetracks are used by experienced professional drivers for a very small percentage of the time that the track is actually used. Just so you know, another hat that I've worn over the past is my dad and I ran the Indian Grand Prix for Bernie, so we were very involved with the circuit in Delhi. And in fact, my dad runs a circuit in the south of India in Chennai. And therefore we've seen, how it's important to make sure that the track layout is something that's conducive to both the experienced pros, but more importantly, perhaps, to people coming to do their first ever track day, or people who are coming with a car club, who've never really driven a track before. So it is a big balancing act, and I'm fairly confident and happy with what we've come up with here on that.
So
yeah, Ben, are you guys just pulling up the video now for everyone?
Yeah, we should just be pulling up a video. Sometimes it can take a little while just to load, but hopefully technology will be on our side.
Okay, I think we'll get to the second for that.
There we go. Hopefully that's given everyone a bit more context of the circuit following the description I gave earlier, and also the onboard lap from Karun and the video recording there. That last video recording's from some of our engineers working in the office. I'm sure Karun could knock some tenths or seconds off of that.
Well, there's a question here from someone on the expected lap time, Ben. I think if I'm not mistaken, the last run we did, was it 1:21.6? I think was the.
We're down in the low 20s now. Yeah. So I think when we started and some of our sims, I've just put on there around a 1:25. I think we're most of the time when we're driving the office around a 1:22. Karun, you've gone quicker. So yeah, we've got a competition going on already. So someone's asking to play the video again, and someone else. So Jack, if you're able to play again, it just allows people to just absorb again, and then we can. I think that opens us up into just more discussion with the group. But hopefully that's been useful for everyone. Let's see if we can get it on again for you guys.
So I think I did see a question there. We were talking about the expected times. I think whatever Karun is running, expect 10 seconds slower for the most of us at least on our best day. But Karun, did you run this in the GT and the track cars? How was that comparing to the F3 speed?
Yeah, I did. I used a Ferrari GTE car, which races at Le Mans, and also a Porsche, just the Porsche Carrera, the GT3 RS, which is obviously a road car. It's quite a high performing road car, but it's quite a popular track day car these days. I think in the Porsche, if I'm not mistaken, it was a 132. But I can dig up the numbers and drop you an email later on, Jeffrey, which you can perhaps share with people. But it was fun. I think I think that middle part of the lap where there's a big flowing section, with the GT car, positioning in the right place is even more tricky because it's much heavier. The Formula 3 car model we got here, well, it's the same in real life, but it's just under 700 kilos. And the GT car, you're pushing 1,200, 1,300 kilos. So you certainly have to be even more precise with the line. But because it's got such a nice flow and some of the corners have got the banking, even if you're slightly away from it, you can, you lose lap time, of course, but you will quite comfortably and safely get around the track. So, it's a lot of fun. And I think, I look forward to coming around, and I'm sure we'll have some track days there doing some passenger rides, Jeffrey, which we can sort out, because I think, in any high performance sports car, really, it'll be a lot of fun.
And for those of you who are familiar with the Goodwood Revival, which is a race that is near and dear to my heart, Karun is one of the very few people who seems to enjoy going around that circuit on 3 wheels. And I hope to eventually have him doing the same thing here at Oro Station, just hanging one up in the air.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I look forward to it.
And just going to some of the other questions that I'd seen coming through here. So we had one asking about running the simulator. So Assetto Corsa is the system that was used for the testing. And I do know that, I mean, we have Assetto Corsa set up at our office. And our club, our friends in Toronto, which are a members only car club in Leaside, they also now have Assetto Corsa set up and running there, and we're going to be able to put the track on there for some demonstration in their simulators. Ben, I don't know how easy it would be to put into iRacing, which was one of the questions there. Would you know that?
Yeah, it's possible. We've got, the raw 3D model. We can shift across into different platforms. Assetto's the platform that we use for our circuit testing, but I'm sure in the future we can release into iRacing and obviously Assetto Corsa as well. So we built the model in full 3D. So we can shift across to various platforms. We've just put the site plan back up on the screen for some of you. There was a couple of other questions that I'll just pick up on. The last one, TJ, I think you're asking about the pits in and out. Obviously, the scale of what we're looking at here on the screen may be difficult to see, but it is on there. So the main pit lane from the pavilion, if you're running your general track days or OEM days, corporate days, as you start to round turn 15, there's a pit exit on the outside line of the track, which brings you in behind the runoff area and into the pavilion, in front of the pavilion. And then if you're rejoining the track, it comes out between turn 1 and turn 2. You might just be able to make that out there. So again, off of the racing line. So yeah, we didn't want to bring it in just before turn 1 because you're then bringing people out. Although it's off the racing line, you're bringing them out right before the corner, potentially into the braking zone. Someone's asked a really good question, and there's one about the car barns, which I've not missed. I'll come back to that, and I think Jeffrey's got some more information that he can share separately. The expectancy of the surface, really, really good question. We're working really, really closely with TransTech Group, who are paving specialists and have worked extensively in Toronto. They build proving grounds and racetracks with Driven. Typically, you would expect the surface to last anywhere up to 20 years, but typically between 10 and 15 years before you look to do a complete resurface. Obviously, the big challenge we've got here in Toronto or north of Toronto is the weather. You've got relatively good summers and obviously harsh winters. And that's, for us, is one of the biggest challenges with paving. So we're currently going through geotechnical studies, paving specifications. I think Jeffrey's enjoying learning about all of the different things there. But yeah, rest assured, that's probably our biggest focus on the design at the moment. So typically between 10 and 15 years before we'd expect to resurface. Someone's asking about breaking ground. I might just, if it's okay, ask Jeffrey to take a couple more questions. Jeffrey, there was one question earlier on about the condo units and plumbing. We have got a whole separate deck and book. We weren't sure for this forum how much detail kind of to go into on all of the different aspects of the site. So hopefully this just gives you everyone an overview of what's available. But there is more detail available on the condo units or car barns and autominiums as we've named them. So Jeffrey can provide some details on those if that's helpful.
Sure. So one thing I was just going to touch on, Ben, was with respect to the pit lane. So there actually is also a secondary pit lane that will be running from turn 5 where it enters into the clubhouse there. So in the days that there is the split format, there are 2 separate pit lanes that can be operating out of. And in terms of the barns themselves, there was a question there about plumbing. Each of those 21 barns that are at the north side of the track between turn 3 and turn 4, those are 2,400 square foot privately owned units trackside for cars to be stored below. And they have a 1,200 square foot mezzanine above, which has been designed to have full bathroom and kitchen in there. And so they become sort of entertaining space overlooking car collections down below and overlooking the track. We have actually seen very quickly an immense interest in those units, and they have actually all been reserved. So all 21 now have people that are eagerly waiting. And I see one of the members there has asked about when we're breaking ground. We are currently going through the structural design on the first model barn, and we are working through the architectural design on the remaining ones. And so we have had a kickoff meeting with the architectural team with Joanne, and they are working through some of the elevation and layouts, looking at texturing and shape of those buildings to make sure that we're getting the right look, feel, and usability with them. They're also working through some of the preliminary designs of buildings down in the Innovation Park itself. So we do have elevation drawings of our pit pavilion building, and we're now moving back from there into others. The condo units, I see they're being asked. There are 6 buildings there that are just over by what you see as F on this site plan that are a larger barn style building. Those are multi-unit buildings that have condo units ranging between 700 square feet and 1,400 square feet on the ground floor. So they'll fit 2 to 6 cars on one level without lifts. Those are one of the next things that are going into design as well, so that we can start to get a sense of what those final size, shape, and layouts will look like. Sales for those are planned to be starting on May 1st of this year. But in terms of the barn's construction, the actual barns at the north side of the circuit will be the first thing built. And we are planning, we're working through the site plan engineering with the township now, which is a lot of the fun, as Ben was talking about, grading, hydrogeology, barrier fencing, ducting, and banks. But the next piece that we are submitting to them is those 21 barns for approval to be able to start digging the foundations. We're expecting to put the first one in sometime late May of this year. The foundations will go in, and then we will just continue after that. And so that by the end of this year, we should have the foundations in for at least 10 of them, and the remainder to start in the spring. Just to touch on high level schedule. So we are, there's a lot of earthwork to be done, but on the high level, we are looking at earthworks throughout this summer. By fall, foundations for barns and pit pavilion building. And next year, we will see paving and barrier fencings on the circuit, and we will see buildings starting to come out of the ground. At that point in time, the track will sort of, towards the end of 2022, as long as we have a good construction season both this year and next, we'll be able to have that tarmac down and start burnishing the asphalt, which, Ben, that is me flexing my newly earned knowledge of asphalt technology and science. But the burnishing period is to take off the surface binders to get the grip. And so that we will be able to run some cars in 2022, and in 2023 would be the grand opening of it, where we are into full use of the circuit itself. I see that we've got a question from Peter on residential occupancy. So no, none of these are allowed to be defined as a residence. This is an industrial property that is specific for automotive use. However, how people use those spaces is up to them. So they do have a loft up there with office spaces, and I'm sure that we will find some people spending the night. The office that we do have here on site is up in the north side of the property. It actually has zoning for bed and breakfast, so that eventually we do have the ability to factor in some accommodation into the overall site plan. And sorry, just reading back, saw just a flurry of questions come in. So local noise restrictions, we've been very fortunate that because we are located across from the airport, we have a very good neighbor when it comes to noise. There are very few residents in the region. We are also just up 600 yards up from Highway 11. And on the other side of Highway 11 is Burroughs Creek, the largest event grounds in Canada, which they run at, I think it's 108 decibels on their property line. We conducted a sound study with Ben and his team, as well as our sound engineers here, who established that at 105 decibels at our track edge, we produce no adverse impacts on any receptors in the region. So that is still to be finalized with the township through engineering. But if we manage to maintain that limit, that would mean that we can be running performance cars, not just street cars, but track rated cars and their decibel levels. So we would be, I think, one of the highest permitted decibel levels in non-competition day noise. Martin has asked about the main feeder road being from Highway 11. It is, and Martin, that road has now been purchased by Simcoe County. It is actually becoming one of their primary routes in the region. So there's an expansion plan that's being announced over the next year in which that road is being expanded and invested into, because the airport is also currently undergoing a $65 million expansion. So we are going to see that road get bigger. But in the future, we have additional lands for expansion to our northeast, which also connect with Line 8. So we have access to 2 roads that both reach Highway 11. Someone's asked about plumbing in the larger condo units. We are looking into that. One of the things in a rural location from a servicing perspective is that, there's a lot of servicing that we have to do on our own. We do have the benefit of having high pressure gas, of having 44 kilovolt wires, which means that we have limitless electric capacity for EV vehicles. That's the highest on-pole transmission cables you can get. And we also now have dark fiber on the property, which gives us some very significant connectivity and broadcast capabilities. But when it comes to wastewater, we are not on a municipal system. So currently we have septic beds designed. Those are accommodating our sewage flows as well as from the main barns. But in order to put bathrooms in each of the automated units, we're going to have to expand that. Fortunately, the county has decided that given the significance of the project and the airport's expansion, they are currently exploring and designing a system for the 2 properties to use, which would allow us to move to washrooms in all of the condo units as well. Sorry, so that was a bit of a fast run there. I was trying to answer them as fast as I saw them coming in. If anybody else has any other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat.
I think as well, if anyone wants to have a chat, we can do that. I think, so don't be feel free to come off mute. I think it was just earlier when we were going through the presentation, it could get a bit messy with everyone chipping in on the audio. So feel free to use the chat forum, or if anyone has any questions for any of us, then feel free. But
and one thing I'm just going to add too that I forgot to mention. So for those who don't know, Lake Simcoe Airport across the street is actually an international airport. So it's currently a 6,000 foot runway, but they have now started the expansion to 7,000. But we do have the ability to have guests fly international and clear customs across the street from us.
Quick question there from Jason. I can see on the screen there. Hi, Jason. On the barriers, we've got a mix actually. So we've got triple guardrails specified in some areas, and then in other areas we're using some of the mobile concrete walls with debris fence attached into the top of them. So there's a mix depending on the risk profile and speed, etc. There's a mix of them around the circuit.
And so I saw the question there from Martin. So Martin, yes, we have Bell. That's the fiber that we currently have running through our roadway out on line 7. So we're very fortunate to be on one of their main fiber hubs. So we have 3 junction points out on our property that are bringing commercial grade fiber optic. And Tesla charging stations, we haven't specifically identified Tesla, but our power capacity, we are designing this with the future in mind. And so both from an internet connectivity perspective, as well as EV charging perspective, that we will have the capacity through our own transformers, customer owned substation on site, so that we can accommodate electric vehicles. And we've had, Ross was asking to expand a little bit on the vision for the Automotive Innovation Park. And so just to talk a little bit about that, I mean, Ben mentioned earlier Bicester Heritage in England, which was an old World War II airfield that was converted into a business park for artisan car restorers, rare suppliers of rare oils and other parts to cars. And it began to foster a community that just developed from not just suppliers and mechanics and people who worked in the field, but suddenly to new technologies. And Lewis Hamilton now keeps his cars there. Motorsport UK has their head office there. I know somebody on the call here also has an office or used to have an office out there. So they've had the pleasure of spending quite a bit of time in that facility. And we look to have the same type of balance here, in that the buildings that you see through there, Monday to Friday, it is a commercial business park. And there will be, for example, we have one shop that is a specialist in restoring vintage American muscle cars. We are also in discussion with a couple of motorsport teams that are looking at moving their race cars up here where they can keep them trackside for shakedowns and testing before they go off to Daytona and Mid-Ohio and wherever else that they're heading to. But on the innovation side, due to the fact that we have the power capacity and the fiber, we are 6 minutes up the highway from Georgian College and the Automotive Business School. We are getting a lot of interest in this new technology space in terms of autonomous and electric vehicle and alternative fuels. And so we see an opportunity here to start looking at exploring the future of mobility, in that we can do things like high-speed autonomous testing on the circuit itself, but also create an environment that attracts those types of engineering minds to be working on this different type of automotive tech here and doing it in collaboration with students. We are talking with another university down in Waterloo that is very advanced in what they're doing in automotive. And I think that we're hoping to position ourselves as an asset for them to continue the education and the work that they're doing in AI and in autonomous, and provide an ecosystem where, you know, this place is focused around innovation of, you know, the industry of the delivery of motorsports, preservation of both the sport and the vehicles themselves, and then the education of not only students, but also the wider public of the new technologies that are coming to the market.
Jeffrey, if I could just add something on that, in terms of the actual track design as well, something that we were very conscious of, and fortunately for me, with my experience of Formula E with the electric racing, you know, I think it's important to future-proof the track layout. And therefore you have to design the track for electric cars and electric racing in the future, as well as road car development. You know, you might have manufacturers and suppliers and battery suppliers and you know, people who are producing the motors or flywheels who want to use the track for testing and development. And therefore you have to create the braking zone for them to do the regeneration for the energy. You have to create a straight of at least 600 meters for them to dissipate the energy that they want. But you've also got to create a flowing section where, you know, the drivers are going on and off the power as they would perhaps when they're driving on the road. And if you look at the way the track is broadly divided, the first half of it until you get up to the sort of turn 5 hairpin, you know, there's three, if you count the start finish straight, you got 3 reasonably long straights. And at that point, you can obviously use the braking and the power dissipation, and then you've got a flowing section to do the other testing. So we were very conscious of the electric mobility side of it when doing the track layout as well.
Yeah, and I think I can see a question here from Martin about E-Series. And yes, so Martin, in terms of the amount of power that we have, the Hydro One has now installed 44 kilovolt lines on our property, which is the highest on-pole transmission. To give you a comparison, the city of Orillia of 35,000 people is fed by one 44 kilovolt feed. We have that equivalent size of power running into our property. So we do have the ability to put in E-Series style chargers. And, you know, I know there's one of the members of the call here is involved in Formula E. And so we are future-proofing to be able to host series in that type of realm in the future. It's not just about focusing on petrol-based vehicles. We're also working with another group that is looking at developing, or is currently developing, a hydrogen race engine. So the technology things for us to look at you know, the future is really exciting, because not only do we get to, you know, enjoy the automotive past and celebrate the ingenuity that's come to this point, but we get to explore the ingenuity of the future itself. There was a question about medical facilities. So we are on line 7 in Oro-Medonte, which is exactly halfway between Barrie and Orillia. And so the Royal Victoria Hospital is 6 minutes to our south on the highway, which is a very large regional hospital with trauma center. And then to our north, we have Orillia's Soldier Memorials Hospital. So between having our own on-site medical facility and then being able to very quickly get to those major hospitals, we have very close access to medical support and services if it were ever needed. And then the airport itself gives us the ability to transport by helicopter if and whenever needed. But the property itself also has helipads to be able to use on the dynamic zone and one up at the members club. technology question about what was going to be incorporated in the track is that we have, many tracks that are reliant on flag marshals. That's a very large volunteer or paid base that really can impact the efficiency of the circuit. And so a big thing in order to be able to accommodate enthusiasts and industry here is making sure that the track itself is run as efficiently as possible. And so we've designed a racing intelligence system for the entire track. So we will have a series of CCTV cameras, in-car flagging and sensors that we have the ability to track all vehicles on property. And so what this means is that if a car were to spin off of the circuit, it would immediately pick that up on a sensor and throw out flags to every car coming up to that location, which makes it a much safer experience. We have that sort of instantaneous digital feedback. It also allows us in a control center to see all of the different cars on track and to be able to process through on video what is going on and where, who is, where on the circuit. But it also allows us to use that as training aids, where it's very easy for us then to track a single car and record that lap. So if we have a driver who is looking at improving or, professional racers that are trying to, figure out how they're approaching an apex of a corner, we have the ability to very easily pull up the camera and say, here, you can see it from outside the car. Ben, I don't know if you can unmute Keith, but he would like to make a comment regarding Formula E, if possible, for Keith Smout.
Yep.
Fine,
and no worries. You might just before Keith, you jump in there. You might see some of the renders were just in the background, just while there's been discussion and questions around buildings. It wasn't part of the presentation deck, but we're just trying in the background there. So you might see some on loop. We just thought that'd be helpful as well for people to get a bit more visualization of what these buildings might look like. Yeah, sorry, Keith.
No problem. Can you hear me okay? Yes, no?
Yeah, Keith, feel free to introduce yourself for those who don't know you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Keith Smout. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for DS Techeetah in Formula E. I've been in Formula E for 6 years now. Started in the first year, 3 races in, and I just wanted to, I thought it might give a bit of a Canadian perspective since that's where I live. Right now there's basically a done deal for a race to come to Vancouver. It's in final contract phases. Obviously COVID has slowed down these situations. But also on top of that, for the last year and a half, just before COVID started, I was with John Tory at the Canadian Embassy, in London, meeting with Formula E. So there are negotiations for a race to come to Toronto as well right now, and they both very promising situations. What I think is interesting is that there'll obviously be a time period because they're likely to fall either before or after New York.
I have a question back on, oh, Keith's gone on mute. Keith, you may have to unmute yourself. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened there.
Sorry, guys, can you still hear me?
Yep, you're back. Yeah, thank you.
The point is that there would be testing opportunities, absolutely, possibly up at the track, because I've already been asked to look for possible locations to operate in between the 2 races. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity to bring that possibility to the table as well.
I have a question actually for yourself, being involved in Formula E. Obviously, to date, it's always been street circuits, and they obviously suit the whole ethos of Formula E is bringing racing to the people in a downtown environment, and obviously, I'm assuming it suits the battery technology more to have the tighter, twistier circuits. Do you think in time, obviously you mentioned testing, do you think anywhere in future years that you'll see Formula E going to selected circuits, or is it more they'll always stick to the sort of the street races? I'm just intrigued. Your opinion.
So the reality is that there's started to be a push towards not always necessarily setting up in a street course itself. So, I mean, Toronto obviously had an interest area because we had the possibility of setting up on the exhibition grounds, which exist for IndyCar, sorry. and the IndyCar contract is over in 2 years. And, you know, there's a lot of comment about noise pollution and those things in Toronto, you know, on a fairly regular basis. But however, the push is to kind of move towards a combination of opportunities. And I think in a kind of smaller track situation that suits Formula E, and to Karen's comments, he made that clear that these are opportunities. So for me, I've obviously would push to look for different opportunities. So whether it's testing or an actual race, I think there's going to be an eventual shift towards that as the cars get faster, have larger battery capabilities. You know, season 9 we start Gen 3 cars, which are completely different than where we're at now, and there'll be a lot more power and output to the wheels, probably front powertrains and the rear powertrain. So there's a lot of stuff coming on the line that will make a natural shift to other areas.
I think funnily enough, we revamped. There's a circuit in Great Britain called Pembrey in Wales, which some of you may know, but it's where Senna, Button, Karun as well would have been testing in the wet weather in Wales, and it was always a very famous circuit for testing out new Formula 3 talent and drivers. And we, a couple of years ago, and this is actually one of the first projects we worked on with Karun, we got asked to come in and to modify the circuit, and their brief to us was, you know, we need to make the circuit more friendly to attract Formula E testing. So we purposely have put in now some hard braking zones, and it's transformed the circuit, not just with overtaking, but it's actually attracted more testing back to them because the circuit's become more challenging for the modern day F3 cars, but also the Formula E cars as well. So yeah, to your point, I think there's definitely opportunities for testing, that's for sure.
Well, we are going to run at Valencia this year. I mean, that's part of the upcoming calendar dates, because obviously partially because of the COVID situation, but we are going to have a race in Valencia. I'm not sure what the configuration will be, whether it's similar to what we use in testing currently or not. But as I said, you know, when you look at Mexico City, of course, we're on the F1 track in a different configuration. It's just the realities of it's not always easy to interrupt a city by coming in and setting up your track and taking a week out of people's lives. And we're very cognizant that that's something we have to be realistic to. So I think there's a natural movement, as I said, and I think that Oro Station may play a decent opportunity for people to go, and even if it's not just about testing, but the opportunity to work on the cars, because as Karun would know, there isn't much time to touch the cars between races. They end up in containers. They're all shipped by one. We don't have trucks that move things around. So possibly it's a place to look towards, you know, a ground where people have actually time in between a 2-week period to work on races, on the cars, I mean, for the next race. So I think there's all sorts of possibilities that could be brought to the table.
Absolutely. And for those of you that are curious to follow around, Keith's team, Techeetah, is now the 2-time in a row champion, Keith, correct me?
Two-time team champions, 3-time drivers.
3-time drivers,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, I worked with every bad F1 team, so I'm still kind of in shock that I've been champions 3 years in a row.
Well, and congratulations. I mean, it's going to be exciting to watch for this year. And just to touch on, I saw a question there from Peter about being able to host visiting race teams with shop space. And so in the Oro Station side of that site plan, we have got almost 28,000 square feet of space, garage space, that is directly on the pit lane itself. So that is between the garages that are within the primary pit pavilion, the 2 flanking support buildings, but there are another 2 buildings up to the north of them that are also against the pit lane there. So not only do we have space for visiting teams, but we have space to actually put them on the pit lane and even segregate them into their own zones if they were doing any type of testing that needed to be away from eyes in terms of working on the vehicle itself. Sean's asked where the race control will be. That is in the primary pit pavilion room. So they're on the 2nd level of that building. Ben has designed in a large server room that will have a wall of TV screens similar to sort of air traffic control. that would be adjacent to the marshalling and timing offices that overlook the circuit. And then we've got Jason's asked about the days with Bexley versus industry and other rentals. So in a similar format to how Area 27 and some of these other private clubs will be run or are being run. So within Bexley Motor Club, the members have at least 15 sessions per month. Now, surplus time will also go to Bexley because they are the primary users. They're the ones that are there the most frequently. But that allows us to have time in which we can then open up the circuit to things like on-site racing teams or for testing days and things of that nature, while still making sure that we're providing ample capacity for the members to be able to use the circuit itself. We've seen that work very well with Area 27. We've been very fortunate that these other circuits have all been incredibly supportive and been very quick to provide Ben and I both with insight to what worked and what didn't with them. And that was one that they said that it, gave them ample time to be able to get lots of cars through. But one thing those circuits don't have is the ability to split as well. And so that gives us opportunities that if we have some testing going on, it may just be the South Short course, which means members will still have access to the North course. And so the idea is that whenever possible, the members are taking up any of the time and space that they want to be there because this is their home, this is their community, but also allows us to bring in the wider industry as well to be a part of it. And then with respect to winter closing, I mean, yes, we are seasonal up here. I've had a lot of questions around seasonality, but I will say that the racing season is longer than both golf and skiing. So while we are seasonal, we are a longer season than some other businesses. But as with respect to winter, the intention is that during the freeze-thaw cycles where the ground is getting cold and then warm, that we would not be racing on the tarmac at that point in time. But once we hit a solid deep freeze, we will have the ability to do things like pack down the snow on the circuit and start to run some racing in the actual snow. That provides opportunities for things like four-wheel drive testing, but as well, if you've seen the success of things like Porsche's Winter Experience or at Mechagleese or some of these other winter driving events, we will be able to host some of that. It'll just be a little quieter in the winter months. Just sort of catching up on questions here. When will your race control team be implemented? So they'll be, part of the operation. So once the track is up and running, there will be people that are running the actual race control that are sort of like having a grand marshal, but with a little bit more of a technical background. And Russ has asked about having access to the barns. Yes, Russ, without a question, you will have access to your barn all throughout the year. So owners of real estate on the property they will actually have 24/7 access to their properties, not just during the hours of operation. So they are able to come onto property at any time that they want to be able to use their spaces. So whether that be working on their cars or whether that just be coming up to enjoy their condos in the winter months, they will have that access.
And Jeffrey, on that point, actually, I didn't mention earlier when we were going through the site plan, there is actually another entrance into the property to the north, which is next to the members area as well. So there's a completely separate entrance, which you might just make out quickly now as we scroll through some of these renders. So
yes, and part of the idea with that too was that if there were, Bicester is famous for its scrambles, whereby Monday to Friday it is a business park, but come the weekend, Bicester opens up to the general public to start coming through, and they are going for cars and coffee or product launches or demonstrations. And suddenly you start to embrace the wider automotive community coming through museum spaces, going to the restaurants, the cafes, which, just to jump gears quickly, we do have a restaurant that overlooks the circuit and will have cafes in the property. So there are things for the general public to do. And so to Ben's point, we also have a secondary entrance for the members club so that on the days where public are in Oro Station's compound, the members have their own ability to get in and out easily and not be, they can avoid the crowds if they want to. George has asked about spectator parking. So one of the things that we've designed in this facility is that this is not designed as a dedicated spectator facility. When you get into spectators, the sheer volume of space that's required in infrastructure can be quite immense. We do have significant broadcast capabilities to be able to broadcast to wider spectators from the facility. But when we do have those types of public events, or when we do have spectators in for certain things, the Dynamics pad, which is almost 6 acres, would be converted into the overflow parking. And so I think, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, we were at 1,470 parking spaces on site without the overflow parking. And then it's almost another 1,000 cars that can fit into the overflow as well. So we do have ample room to be able to accommodate large volumes of guests. But the one thing we wanted to try and do was strike a balance whereby day to day, this did not feel like Silverstone, which is vast and empty when the spectators are not there. We wanted it to have a degree of intimacy. We wanted it to feel a little bit more like a golf course, and not lose its sense of scale between one type of use to the other. So we've really tried to balance that. And the other thing that we've done is that Bicester Heritage and Goodwood and Circuits of England have got a lot of history and pedigree to them that makes them very significant in terms of their architecture and feel. And having a sense of presence and a sense of place in the architecture makes a big difference. And so if you notice from some of these renderings, a lot of these buildings take on a barn vernacular. And that is a bit of an homage to the region and to Ontario, but we are designing the entire facility to look like courtyards of barn style buildings. So they take on a bit of a rustic feel. They have modern elements added to them, but by having that connected architecture, we're ensuring that sense of place and that presence throughout the design of the facility. And that actually, just one other thought that's come to mind. So while I did mention that we have our 21 barns have been reserved there on the north side of the circuit, on some of these renderings, you'll notice a large green area in the center that's been untouched. And we had left that for future expansion on the grounds that by designing the circuit the way Ben has, it means that that space can now become more usable. It doesn't just get lost to the infield. So we are looking and exploring the potential of putting some additional barns into that space in the future, so that we can accommodate some of the demand. I mean, if you look at circuits like M1 Concourse down in Detroit, they've now sold 270 units around their circuit there. And whereas we only currently have 85 designed into our plan.
It's a question there from Sean, which is a good one about the karting track or lack of karting track. This was something actually we discussed and looked into quite carefully at the beginning of the project. And I think at some point in time, Jeffrey, there was a zone for a karting track, probably where the dynamic zone is. But Sean, to answer your question, so for a decent sized karting circuit, so anywhere between 800 meters and 1200 meters, you typically occupy around 15 or 20 acres. To give you a sense of scale, the dynamic zone, as Jeffrey mentioned there, is around 5 or 6 acres. So quite a lot more space needed for a full scale karting track. And it was starting to compromise Jeffrey's vision in terms of the main circuit and some of the innovation park. But I do believe there's opportunities to use that dynamic zone for temporary karting, whether it's for kids or days that you might want to use that space. So we see that being as a large flexible space that you can accommodate karting, but we've not got a permanent track there.
But I will say, Ben, that to that comment, Sean, the more we have looked at it, especially given the region and the young drivers that have grown up in this area and their affinity for motorsports, I think it's becoming increasingly clear that it's going to be a pretty important piece of infrastructure to have, both for members' enjoyment, general public enjoyment, but also for cultivating the next generation of drivers. And so the site plans that you see here are only a portion of our overall property. So we have quite a bit of land up here that we're going to be looking to future expansion plans, focusing on the current site plan as it is now, but it is very likely that a full-scale karting track will be added in time. And Jason and Brian, I see you here, is jumping on the idea about having a spec series, gentleman spec series, and through Bexley Motor Club, that will absolutely be something that we do. So something of a club championship. By way of example, Monticello down in New York currently runs a Mazda Miata series where all of their members have to buy and drive the same car, same spec, and it becomes down to their skill as drivers. And so we will have opportunities to do things like that, where we create a sort of club championship that's around one spec vehicle, as opposed to somebody coming out with a high horsepower, high dollar figure car and just naturally winning. It will come down to the driver's skill and become something that's a lot more fun for members to engage in.
I think that's been a huge success at Autobahn as well, where people then feel that they can, they're racing on par with other friends and family and competitors, and then they can move up the ladder. So I think that's a great idea.
Well, I think Monticello, I mean, they have members that have some very, very nice cars, and yet they're showing up and jumping in their Mazdas every time to make sure they're getting faster in their spec little cars so that they can take the club trophy.
Well, I'll tell you what, if it's anything like the MX-5 on the sim, I can tell you last night I did a sim race which had Indy 500 winners, Le Mans winners, F1 drivers. Also, there were about a dozen of us who get together for a boys sim night in. And we all raced Mazda Miatas around Mosport yesterday, and it was very, very entertaining. So, I'll sign up for that.
Well, and I know Roger's volunteered the information, so I can say it, but Roger has a fleet of F2000s here in Ontario. So he may be an obvious, very quick season 1 club championship in the F2000s. Provided you're willing, Roger.
I think we've, just in terms of timing, I think we've got a few minutes left. We're sort of scheduled around 90 minutes for the call. So, I hope this has been very useful and insightful for everyone. We wanted to give just a high level view of what's going on, give you some insights into what we're doing with the track design mainly, but also just a glossary of kind of the site plans. So yeah, we've still got some time left on the call, but just as a heads up, probably a few minutes left, and then we'll wrap up. So if there are any more questions, then feel free to get them in for Jeffrey before we wrap up the call.
Well, I think, Ben, I may just touch on, so in terms of some of the updates as to what's going on within Bexley and the Members Club itself. So we have, we're obviously going through a pandemic, and it's been, tough for everyone to get face-to-face meetings or to come up here to see the site. But we are still taking active meetings at this point in terms of people signing up for membership. There have been some questions today about condo units. And the way we've decided to do it is that the members who are signing up and are putting down their deposits for membership, they will be issued the condo units in priority of their member number. So people are effectively sort of getting in line now to say that they would like to have their pick of the condo units when they come out. So, whether it be our existing members now or others who have joined this call that are interested in joining, I encourage you to reach out, or friends to reach out to begin scheduling those meetings if there's interest in talking and learning more about this and joining us, because, at the end of the day, this was envisioned to be something that built a sense of community for a shared passion. And I think for people in the automotive world, they know how deep that passion runs. And we're very excited to already be in a case of growing our community. A number of members have been on the call, and I think that every one of them that I've spoken to has been incredibly enthusiastic about what we're building, excited to be part of it. And I'm really happy that you could all join today to see a little bit of the inside workings of what the team has been doing, and to learn more about how this is coming together. Neil, you and I can talk offline on that if you'd like to look at a condo as well. Yeah.
Yeah, from our side as well, just to add on to what Jeffrey was saying, obviously we're based over in the UK. I'm hoping we can get back over and start traveling again soon to various places once we get through some of this pandemic. And but if there's any questions circuit related that you'd like to field, then feel free to loop through Jeffrey. We can feedback to you on anything on the track. And yeah, very excited. For us, this is an incredible project. We're really, really proud to be involved and loving seeing it develop. So yeah, thanks to everyone for taking the time out of your busy days and yeah, I look forward to hopefully meeting some of you as it progresses.
And I'm going to ask the obvious question on behalf of everyone. Are those your trophies behind your head or those Henry's?
They're trophies from my old karting days, which I genuinely have nowhere else to put them in. So yeah, my wife basically says I have to go in the study. So yeah, I feel a bit egotistic having them up because they were there before all of these Zoom calls started, and I've just not moved them. So yeah, they're not there.
You'll have to remind me. So everyone, for those who don't know, Ben actually still has 1 or 2 track records in karting, lap records.
Yeah, I used to, not quite Karun's level of racing, but I used to race superkarts. So for those of you that might know what they are, so the gearbox karts around the UK and in Europe. So I was lucky enough to win some championships there in the UK. Yeah, I think I've still got that record at Silverstone and Alton Park. But I'm not doing that anymore. I'm married with 2 children now, so it makes you think of a little bit differently to superkart. But I still enjoy getting out on track and in some saloon cars, which I think is important actually as a track designer. I think it's important that you're out on circuit and understanding what it feels like from a driver's point of view. So yeah, got some driving pedigree behind me as well as an engineering background.
And Sean, I saw your question there about contact information. Feel free to reach out to Amanda. So Amanda is our, well, actually, there she is. As I'm saying it, she's put up a message there with her email. But Amanda is our primary point of contact for all questions related to Oro or to Bexley, and that she has been scheduling meetings, etc., and coordinating, getting answers to everyone's questions as this thing begins to take legs and run on its own. Was that Pippa?
This is your new test driver.
Sorry, yes, unfortunately my new test driver just rocked up and he's trying to kick me out of the sim basically.
So Karun, I said to Ben this morning when I saw your Instagram post that maybe we needed to do a last minute change to get a real Chandok driving.
We were doing, I was recording some laps and stuff for Ben this morning, and I until today I've managed to not show him the sim, but now he's seen it. It's turned into a disaster. But
big mistake.
The perils of kids being locked up at home and not going to school.
Yeah, I'm sure your wife is going to love that you now have him on a sim.
Well, yeah, exactly. But anyway, yeah, I just want to quickly come back on video and say, I hope you guys found that useful and informative. I think, Ben, we've got an onboard lap, which you can maybe share a link to people if, again, via Jeffrey and Amanda, if someone wants to keep an eye on that for later use.
Brilliant.
Okay, well, I think if there are no other questions, I want to thank everyone who's come into attendance today and been part of it. And Ben and Karun, thank you. I really sincerely appreciate your presentations and being able to share all of this information with everybody, because it's fun to make them part of the process.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you, everyone.
Okay, thanks everyone, and look forward to getting you all up here soon.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Okay.
And everyone.